this course is really technologically advanced. I'm not used to that, and I'm also being recorded here on a recording device. Quite impressive. Welcome back to the second part of this afternoon's focus on foreign aid. What I want to show you now and perhaps provoke some further comments, are some aspects of, we might call it a different kind of aid system. And here I'm not referring to the aid that flows, and you can find it in the statistics, it's called other official flows, such as the money that goes from the United States to Egypt or to Israel or to Indonesia, but it is not counted as official development assistance, ODA, because it has no demonstrable developmental or humanitarian component. It's just political money. It's often military money. We're not going to talk about that, but something rather different, and I think you might be a bit surprised at what I'm going to show you, but maybe not. I'm going to begin by showing you the current state of world financial flows. This chart is a chart that is labeled, and I've made it on the basis of data that I pulled from a very recent United Nations document. It's called Financial Flows from Developed to Developing Countries. And the statistics, therefore, offer a view that in the case where monies are flowing generally from the poor, or from the rich to the poor, they would be going above this line of 0. But as you can see, they are not. In other words, this chart reflects the netto, the nettoed out, or the per saldo result of all world financial flows, at least those flows that could be detected by the United Nations, together. In other words, they added up on the one side all the monies, foreign aid finance, private investment, portfolio flows, that is going to stock markets in poor countries, together with, on the one side, together with all the flows from developing countries to developed parts of the world, repatriation of profits, the flow of speculative capital, the flow of taxes, and other flows, and also repayment of debt. And they added both of these up over a period of, now this is the chart that's produced in the latest, 18 years. And you can see that it is actually Africa that is aiding the rich. It is Latin America that is aiding the rich. It is the so-called economies in transition that are per saldo, in net terms, aiding the rich. If China were to be put on this chart, the line would be even steeper and deeper. It would be about there. And this phenomenon has began to accelerate about 10 years ago, and it doesn't seem to be stopping. Now, there are lots of reasons for this. Some of this money, by the way, is still, in formal terms, in the possession of the African, Latin American, and transition countries. It's kept as reserves, but it's kept in northern banks, or northern stock markets, or northern real estate. So I think this is this is an aspect of today's world that puts in perspective real foreign aid. And by the way, we're talking about very serious money. The amount coming from Africa in 2008 was, in net terms, that's including the aid money going to Africa, the net terms was Africa was providing to the rich world about 126 billion US dollars. Now, this kind of thing is not much discussed, and I think it deserves more attention. But let's move on and fill out some of the aspects of this in these financial flows. Let's take the repayment of debt. In the year 2006, just taking that category of the very poorest countries, the Tanzanias, the Guinea-Bissaus, the Afghanistans, and so on, their transfers, or transfers that they received officially through the official aid system, were on the order of 16 billion, whereas their repayments in interest on loans was on the order of 18 billion. The situation has changed somewhat thanks to the reorganization of debt, but it remains a common thing. Here's a bit of historical information about the African debt. And I think the striking thing here is that this is total net transfers, but only in the case of loans, both private loans, but it's mainly official loans. Africa receives, by and large, mainly official loans. In the 70s, you had a surplus of oil revenues accumulating in banks. How do we move these on? And there developed an enormous movement in which players like the World Bank took part to move those monies to Africa, to lend them, make them into loan packages. Well, that was done, hence this bulge in the 70s. And then in the 1980s, it began to flip, and the general line now is the netto. It's, well, certainly throughout the 90s it was negative through to about 2005. In other words, the net stream of capital coming was, in terms of loans and repayments of loans, negative for Africa, these 41 sub-Saharan African countries. Now, you could say, to what degree is aid responsible for these kinds of flows? In a certain important way, aid is just one of a number of players, and a lot of the players, of course, are big commercial corporations. You also have illicit flows. However, as I said, most of Africa's debt is with official creditors, so aid did have a role there. A study carried out a couple of years ago by World Bank economists showed that the so-called soft loans, or loans offered under terms of very low interest rates and long payback terms, they studied those very carefully, and they compared them with the then going rates in the private markets for capital. And the researchers came to the conclusion that for quite a few countries, countries like Turkey, Poland, Colombia, Peru, Laos, and so on, that the terms applied by the soft foreign aid were in fact harder terms than what were available to those countries in the open capital markets. So aid is not always so soft. Another part of flows is the corruption aspect. The World Bank, when Wolfensohn arrived in 1995, he was astonished to discover that, and now the current bank president has also said it's time to wipe out the amount of corruption, in other words, a source of illicit monies leaving these countries, thanks to corruption. Whoops. Another way in which aid is involved in flows is that aid projects often have costs that can only be met by purchasing goods and services from abroad. Technical assistance, spare parts, fuel, that are attached to aid projects that make them in the long term more expensive and therefore help account for the monies flowing from poor to rich. Scholarship programs. Some of you are probably beneficiaries of scholarship programs. I think if these were to be added up, and we could have a discussion about this, we were talking in the break about the net balance of benefits. On balance, brain drain is an issue, and it leads to strange situations like this one. The Royal Africa Society a couple of years ago noticed that there were more health professionals from the country of Malawi working in Birmingham than there were health professionals in Malawi. I still can't quite believe this, but this comes from a very reputable scientific source that looked very carefully at the state of play. And there are some who've tried to put an economic figure on this and call it reverse technology transfer. I think there's something in that.